Formalities. Good evening. It is 6:01 p.m. My name is John Mursky, Chair of the Ann Arbor Energy Commission. As Chair, I'm calling this meeting to order. I'm participating from my home here in Ann Arbor. Welcome to the April 12th, 2022 electronic meeting of the Ann Arbor Energy Commission. This virtual meeting is to effect social distancing and to mitigate the spread of the COVID-19 virus. We will conduct this meeting similar to in-person meetings. Commissioners, during the roll call, please indicate your current location. During the meeting, please remain on camera, just as you would be visible during in-person meetings. Also, mute your microphone when not speaking. Public comment will be via telephone only. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, that's at the beginning and end of the meeting, please call one of the following toll-free numbers: 877-853-5247 or 888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID number 937-6751-6819 on your phone. This number or this information is also available on the published agenda in the public notices section of the city website and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN channel 16 and AT&T channel 99, as well as online at www.a2gov.org/watchctn. Missy, would you please read the land acknowledgement?
Absolutely, Chair Mursky. I acknowledge that the land the city of Ann Arbor occupies is the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe and Wyandot peoples. I further acknowledge that our city stands, like almost all property in the United States, on lands obtained generally in unconscionable ways from Indigenous peoples. The taking of this land was formalized by the Treaty of Detroit in 1807. Knowing where we live, work, study, and recreate does not change the past, but a thorough understanding of the ongoing consequences of this past can empower us in our work to create a future that supports human flourishing and justice for all individuals.
Thank you. So now we will take a roll call. Before we start that, 2 points of note. First of all, I received a notice from Cole Stevens that he's going to be late for the meeting. He'll be joining us about halfway through. And I also wanted to announce that we will have a new energy commissioner. She's officially appointed already, but she's out of town and presenting at a conference. And so she was not able to attend tonight's meeting. Her name is Sharice Smith, and she will attend the May meeting, at which time she will introduce herself, give you a little bit about her background. She works as a consultant in the energy space, and Missy and Carlene and I have all met her and reviewed her resume and everything, and she's really an outstanding addition to the commission. So we're really looking forward to welcoming her next month. Missy, if you could conduct the roll call then, that would be great.
Absolutely. Chair Mursky.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Great, thank you. Vice Chair Colvin Garcia.
Here from Ann Arbor also, thank you.
Thank you. Forgive me, I'm trying to capture this in notes. Commissioner Hookham. Absent. Okay. Commissioner McComber.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Councilmember Briggs.
Sorry, here from Ann Arbor.
Great, thanks. Commissioner Levin.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Councilmember Radina.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner McCoy.
Here.
And did you say Ann Arbor? Okay, great, thanks. Commissioner George.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Commissioner Kerber.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Peck.
Here from sunny Ann Arbor.
It's true. Commissioner Juneau.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Emily said, let me just see if Cole is here. Okay, so Cole's not here right now and Sharice is not, but Chair, you have a quorum. You're on mute, John.
Oops, thank you very much. So we have an agenda and hopefully people have taken a look at that. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda and then a second, and we'll take a vote. So a motion from Councilmember Adina and a second, I think, was from Councilmember Briggs. All those in favor say aye or raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? I guess I should have asked any changes. Let me do that retroactively or after the fact. Are there any necessary changes? Okay, so we will stick with the agenda as approved then. We also have minutes. They're posted on Legistar. I've reviewed them. Hopefully others have as well. Can I get a motion to approve those minutes? So moved by Commissioner McCoy and seconded by Commissioner McCumber. All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed? No one's opposed. They pass unanimously. So now we're at public input. I just wanted to mention before we got into public input that we received, and the commissioners all know this, but we received 2 letters commenting on one of the presentations scheduled for tonight. That's on this a landfill project. One was from a representative of Ann Arbor for Public Power, and the other was authored by 3 commissioners, one of whom was myself. And we will do our best to address the questions posed in those. I just wanted to mention that so when people are thinking of calling in, they know that in advance. So we still encourage people to call in and to provide comments on anything relevant to tonight's agenda, as well as any other topics that are important to you related to energy. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes. If you're watching on CTN, please call again. The number is 888-788-0099 or 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 937-6751-6819. This information is also displayed on the meeting agenda and in the video feed. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone. You will hear an automated message that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. And finally, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments.
Caller ending in 228.
Hello, can you hear me?
We do.
Thank you. My name is Greg Woodring. I'm the president of Ann Arbor for Public Power, and I wanted to call in about the solar landfill presentation. I appreciate Chair Mirsky mentioning the email that Ann Arbor Public Power submitted asking a few various questions. I just wanted to call in to reiterate that, we're really curious to learn more about this project. There is certainly something very attractive about building up some solar power in the city, especially with the speed that it could be built at. But there are a few concerning aspects that I'm hoping will be cleared up throughout the presentation. One thing that I'm wondering about is the solar that we are building up going to count against DTE's requirement to build up renewable energy generation? It seems that if that is the case, then we're not really increasing the amount of solar that is going to be available in Michigan in total. We're simply allowing DTE an easier avenue to build up that solar generation that they're already required to create. Additionally, I've heard in the past that we may be selling RECs based off of this energy, renewable energy credits. I'm curious if that's the case, because those two things put together seems to indicate that we would really be potentially creating less renewable energy total by doing this project rather than not doing it at all. We would both be reducing DTE's requirement to generate renewable electricity, as well as selling credits that would alleviate someone else of their obligation to build up renewable energy. So I'm hopeful that we'll get cleared up. And finally, I'd just like to say that I really hope we can think of a way that this could be rolled into the SEU project or the traditional muni project. It seems like it would be a much better value to Ann Arbor residents if we owned it directly. I'm curious to hear what the reasoning for having DTE own this solar project is. But from an outsider point of view, it certainly seems like it would be a much better deal if Ann Arbor was the primary owner of this solar landfill project. So thank you for your time. I look forward to a very elucidating presentation.
Thank you for your comments.
Caller ending in 661.
Hello, can you hear me?
We do.
All right, thank you. Hello, my name is Gus Teske. I live at 313 Montgomery. I'm a supporter of Ann Arbor for Public Power. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm calling in support of the landfill solar array project. It's a great idea. It makes total sense. If you want to cut carbon emissions for electricity, I believe that the landfill is the only major public open area in Ann Arbor where we could put an array. So it's worth a thorough discussion. And thanks to the Energy Commission for giving the public a chance to comment on it. I've learned a few things about the project that concern me, so I have a couple of questions. The first is, how will the construction of the landfill solar array be financed? I understand the subscribers will collectively pay the entire cost of the project through, individual utility bills, but the DTE will own the physical asset. So, and then question number two, will DTE assume any unreimbursed costs for this project? And if so, what are they? The City Council was told in 2020 that DTE will not have any financial responsibility for the project, although they will own it. The city has already paid DTE's preliminary engineering review and distribution study, and for the environmental assessment. So will DTE pay anything for this solar array that Ann Arbor is going to give to it? Those are my two questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller ending in 134.
Thank you, Dr. Stalton, Chair Mursky, and Garber, 28 Haverhill Court. Yeah, I'm going to speak on landfill solar too. I think we can agree on three things. First, staff has put a huge amount of diligent and creative work into this project and deserves a recognition for that. Second, we still need more information. I've seen the list of questions from A2P2 and they overlap with a lot of my own. I expect that we'll get answers from tonight's staff presentation. The third thing we can agree on is that the current plan is not ideal. There are a lot of trade-offs. Yes, we want to get this solar energy on the grid as soon as possible. That's extremely important. But giving this valuable asset to DTE is painful, especially since we're already talking about buying it back once we can directly use the power. Buying back the landfill solar project is even in the new Muni RFP. Of course, as a business deal, this is absurd, but we're not a business. Not to be too grandiose, but we're here to stave off global catastrophe. But there may be ways the city could keep ownership and use the power directly with only a small delay. maybe a few years. Run transmission lines to the water and sewage plants, as A2P2 suggests. Get in the queue for a MISO connection. Work to legalize true community solar at the state level, then implement it here. Get the SEU or a parallel utility up and running and start selling power to local commercial users. These options are not mutually exclusive, but they do require owning the asset. Yes, we could buy it back from DTE in 5 years, 7 years, but the price will be very high. Selling would take renewable power capacity off their books, so it's worth a lot more to DTE than mere market value, and we would pay a big premium. I share the first caller, Greg Woodring's, concern about additionality of this project. I think it's a valid question. I don't know the answer. If it isn't additional, then we're better off on our own doing an additional solar farm. And even if it is additional, I think we still need to have a conversation around ownership. Thanks.
Thank you.
That's all, Chair Mirsky.
Very good. Okay, so let me pull out the agenda here, just a second. So the first presentation or point on the agenda, I should say, is the capital investment process and how that overlaps with our sustainability agenda. And Deb, I think you're joining us this evening to present. Thank you very much. Appreciate you spending your evening with us. And Missy, I don't know if you want to introduce the topic briefly first, or if you want to just hand things over to Deb.
I want to thank Deb for coming. You may not know, but Deb is retiring in just a few weeks. So I think you might be one of her last public meetings, and we grabbed her so we could get all that institutional knowledge before she transitions. And she's doing a beautiful job passing it on to Kayla Coleman. But I just want to acknowledge, Deb, the work that you've done for the city for a blink of an eye, but a longer time than that. And you will be sorely missed. But thank you for spending one of your last public meetings with us. So without further ado, Deb, do you want to share your slides, or do you want me to run them?
I can just go ahead and do a share screen. I think I have the ability to do
I
it.
gave you the right, I think.
All right, so I'm going to click it here in just a minute. So my presentation is not terribly long tonight, but what I would like to do is kind of quickly cover where we have been in the capital improvement plan and how we started out integrating sustainability, where we are today, and where we hope to go next. So that's sort of my goal. And with that, I will give you just a second and share screen. Okay, I assume we're all set at this point?
Yes, we see it.
Yeah, it's always weird how in Zoom, unlike when we do Teams meetings, I don't actually see what you see once I go to this mode. So we're good. So
is there a chance you could go to like slideshow mode? It's still showing some borders and things like that. I don't know if you can do that.
Yeah, hold on.
Just go view, Deb.
Right, but I think that I grabbed just the PDF because sometimes that's easier. So I
go to full screen mode. I think it should work. View and then full screen mode. A little bit farther down near the bottom. There we go.
Mode. Yep.
That works.
That better?
That's a little bigger. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, great. So as again, weird looks exactly the same on mine. So, all right. So with that, I wanted to start very briefly just explaining how the capital improvement plan is put together so you can see where the ability to integrate sustainability as the plan is put together. And then, of course, once we implement plans is the second and probably more major opportunity. So one thing that's important to understand, because not all cities organize, I'm going to call it CIP out of brevity at this point, but we organize our CIP by asset groups. And we set it up that way because generally speaking, these groups are not competing with each other for money. So when we go to doing the prioritization, like we'll talk about later, and where we can integrate sustainability criteria, each group has then more flexibility in setting up those criteria. And again, like water funds don't compete with sewer funds or street millage funds. So it works well to parse out the groups like that. So we have 3 overarching groups. That's municipal facilities, transportation, and utilities. And then we break each one down further. So municipal facilities include city-owned buildings, parks and recreation, and solid waste. Transportation is the biggest group because we have our municipal airport. Active transportation is the area where things you do that don't involve a motor, so bicycling, pedestrian activities, anything that gets people out of their cars, basically. We do maintain, I believe it's 16 bridges in the city. New streets is a very minimal category because generally Ann Arbor is quite built out. We're not really much in the business of new streets. Mostly what ends up in that category is requests to pave gravel streets. Other transportation is other things that happen inside the limits of the right-of-way, but that are not about getting around like on your feet or on a bike. So that's like signs and signals would fall in there. If the Downtown Development Authority does streetscape projects to beautify them. So that's where other transportation is really other right-of-way projects. Parking facilities, the city owns a number of parking structures and some surface lots. They're actually operated for us through the DDA, but they're still city assets. So improvements to those still fall in our capital improvement plan. Street construction speaks for itself. And transit is basically the future train station and an idea about queue jump lanes for buses are in there. So it's quite a tiny category, but we distinguished it out because it has unique properties. And then the final asset teams are utilities, sort of self-explanatory. We have sanitary, sewers, stormwater, and water. And in the sanitary and water, that includes the plants themselves that are operating the system, as well as all the pipes that are part of the system. So groups of staff are organized by these asset groups, and to create the plan, I always refer to it as the 3 Ps. So the first thing we do is identify new projects. And where those ideas come from is pretty broad. Sometimes they come directly from citizen requests, or maybe it's a group more than an individual citizen. But throughout the year, I may receive emails saying anything from, can you pave my street, to, I think we need a crosswalk here. So we do get requests that come in that way. Master plans, so many asset groups have long-term capital plans, and they say, when you get to this point, you should do X. So we get ideas from master plans. And then probably the biggest single source is staff knowledge. Nobody knows better where the water mains are breaking, or where the heating and cooling isn't working very well, or whatever, to suggest projects. So we actually have a meeting at which people present projects. If we're in a year like this is an even numbered year, so we tackle a full 6 years. In the even numbered years, we only look at the front 2 years and the odd. That keeps us in cycle with the capital budget. So people can suggest other things that aren't already in the CIP, and they can also suggest changes to the scope of the project. So that's always meeting one of the first of the 3 Ps. And just a quick notion of what makes something eligible to go in the plan. We're looking for capital improvements that cost more than $100,000. And it could also be a suite of projects that cumulatively go over that limit. So let's say Missy suggested, a series of EV charging stations, and it was 25, 25, 25, 25, 4 years in a row, as long as the project itself reaches that 100,000. Below that, things tend to get funded through operation and maintenance. And then also, we will fund studies in the capital improvement plan if they're going to lead to a capital improvement. So let's say we do, a study of all our buildings, an energy assessment. Then we know that that's going to lead to some energy related changes, or we study, flooding areas, and we know that will lead to some stormwater projects. So studies that are more than 50,000 that will lead to capital improvements also make it into the plan. Then the next thing that we do is actually prioritize the project. And this is where we're going to spend a little time, and I'm going to finish going through the process itself first. But if we have this whole body of projects, we have to have a way to decide what to do first. What's more important to the city? What contributes more to our goals? So any new project that is added is prioritized. And if someone suggested a scope change to a project that's already in the plan, we rescore it to prioritize it. And I'll mention in a minute, we're using a software called Alavance that we tend to refer to it more as strategic value scoring, but everybody still calls it prioritization, but we think of it as what strategic values can this project advance. And while we're working on that, finance is off to the side, setting the parameters for us, because in order to get to the next step of program, we have to know how much money do I have to spend in the water group in 2024. So I have to have a financial target for the teams to be keeping their ideas within. And then the final step is actually programming. And by that, I mean, what year is this project going to fit in the plan? And how much is it going to cost? So to create that plan, obviously we have a prioritization score, and that's very important. However, it can't be the only thing. We might say, oh gosh, we'd like to do a train station tomorrow, but it's $80 million. I don't have $80 million. So it doesn't matter if it's number one, it's still not going to happen until we have the funding available. And the other thing is the city works very hard to coordinate projects across asset groups with each other. So for example, if we are going to be paving a street, we always have asked the question, is the water main okay under there? Does the sewer need any attention? Are we having flooding? Do we need to do stormwater work? And each of those might be projects in their own bucket, but we have to coordinate them together. And then the last little box I have here says staff and contractor capacity. And that I'm sure will not come as a surprise to any of you, but that's become quite the challenge. Contractors are busy, and we're competing against other cities, counties, the state for those same contractors. We can't predict exactly, but we do tend to know which areas were more short than others in contractor capacity. So we at least consider that a bit. So we put all those projects that we prioritize. We try to do the highest scoring ones first, depending on the funding availability and coordinating with other projects. And out of that, we create the 6-year capital improvements program. And this is basically just reiterating. We look if it's coordinated with something, we slot it the first available time, and we keep adding projects in a given year till our bucket is full, and then we move to the next fiscal year, and then we go back and keep iterating if another group comes along and says, oh, I really can't wait another year on my water project. But all of that leads to a plan. And then the last thing I like to talk about before I turn to sustainability specifically is whose responsibility is it in the city to approve the CIP? And so Planning Commission itself, under state law, is the body that approves the capital improvement plan. It is technically a planning document. It has dollars assigned to projects at the planning level, but the Planning Commission actually holds a public hearing and eventually votes and adopts the plan. And then at that point, the CIP is the building block for the city's capital budget. So generally in the administrator's budget, the CIP projects have been moved in, almost completely intact. One place where there tends to be little adjustment is if general funds are used, because those are not a revenue source in the same sense of, we all pay a water bill. If we live in city, there's the water revenue. We, have a street millage and so on. So general funds come from property taxes, but they're used both for capital and non-capital. So there can be some tweaks, but generally speaking, what's approved in the CIP leads to what is approved in the capital budget. So let's turn now to how do we roll sustainability ideas in? Well, back in fall of 2020 is when we switched to the Elevance software. And up until that point, we had the same prioritization criteria across all groups. And there were like 8 of them. And then there were a couple of special ones that groups came up with, but basically every group had the same scoring. And that seemed good on the surface. However, what we found in years of practice is people would say, well, that doesn't really apply to our group. And I feel like I'm scoring this for nothing or whatever. So we began the process of refining, and we did our 6th largest of those asset groups in fall of 2020 and scored projects for the first time. And one of the things we wanted to do in those change was to start to find an increased emphasis on energy and greenhouse gas emissions, climate preparedness, equity, and so on. So as you're all aware, the city has had a sustainability framework for a number of years with 16 goals baked into it. And what we had been doing was that in all of those groups with a universal criteria, sustainability as an element of deciding what projects to advance was the same thing. It was basically, of those 16 possible goals, how many can the project help advance? So it was better than nothing. However, there are things like, local food source that'd be pretty darn hard for, say a water project to do anything to assist. So again, people would say it doesn't feel quite right. So once we had this opportunity to define things related to sustainability, we began to do that. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples of what groups came up with. And again, this is just reiterating where we were. You could score 0, 3, 7, or 10 points, depending on how many of those goals that you ticked. But once we got through these groups, so active transportation, parks and rec, street, sanitary, storm, and water were the groups we've done this tweaking on. In some ways, for the things like you folks care about the most, energy, there wasn't a tremendous opportunity to incorporate that component of sustainability, but I'll show you where we did it. And then, we'll talk about the next steps. So one of the components of sustainability was equity. And one of the things we found as we tried to develop criteria is there's not a lot out there to guide you. And so we started with some of the things where it has to be a scoreable metric. So for equity, we realized that this neighborhoods at risk, which is sort of a national level data set, had set some metrics related to households in poverty. So census tracts for the city of Ann Arbor allowed us to see within each census tract how many households were living in poverty. And I have to say, it was kind of an eye-opener for me. I think we all think living in Ann Arbor that we don't have households in poverty, or a lot of people, I think, believe that, but we do have them, and there's definitely differences in different census tracts. So one example of an equity scoring now, instead of numbers, we use low, medium, and high desirability. And behind them, there's still a graph, so it's not straight line. But for example, this was used in a couple of groups. If the project occurred in a neighborhood with a low percentage of households in poverty, meaning less than 5%, it got the lower score. If there were 5 to 10% of the households in poverty in that census tract, it got medium. And if there are greater than 10%, and there are such tracts in the city, then they scored the higher thing. So this started to bring in one aspect of equity, it being economic equity. It's certainly not the only one, but it was one that everybody said yes. And it helps then keep you from accidentally spending more money in a wealthier census tract than in one that isn't within the city. And it was interesting to see, having done this for 10 years, how it did actually advance some projects based on that score. Another example was trying to get at the idea that there are some groups that don't consume energy per se, but they still have the opportunity to foster non-motorized travel as a way to decrease greenhouse gas emissions. So in one of the groups, they called the scale user experience, not sustainability, but they were then looking at the kind of things that encourage non-motorized travel. So in this group, and I believe this was active transportation, it's like, well, filling sidewalk gaps, adding crosswalks, adding bike lanes helps encourage non-motorized. So we just did the same thing and set some metrics. The sidewalk gap plan itself has a baked-in prioritization. So where did it score on that? We have a transportation master plan that highlights certain crosswalks that we think will be more important to safety and to increasing mobility. So we baked in where they would score on that. And then also the bicycle network now in the new transportation plan has like critical, non-critical, and so on. So there was another sustainability related criteria that a group came up with. Parks and Rec actually created a criteria called Protect Natural Systems. So another way of looking at sustainability issues. And when they tried to decide how do we know what projects are doing that, they looked at metrics of stormwater runoff control. Is it literally impacting natural system and biodiversity, positively or not positively? And what is its impact on natural resources? So these seem a little vague, but yet when people went to score them, they felt pretty comfortable analyzing one project versus the other as to which one was helping more. Another example, and this was again in Parks and Rec, they literally said, does it contribute to A20 goals as a metric? And they said if it doesn't contribute, obviously it gets a lower score. If it contributes to, now we're back to counting in a way, but at least one of the A20 resilience strategies, it can get to medium if it does 2 or more. And they actually, to remind people, listed in the metric what some of those strategies were, like power electric grid with renewable energy, switch out appliances, and so on. And not all these projects could do all of these things, but some of them could help. Also, they still recognized if they did something to interconnect people in a way that didn't require vehicles, that was helping contribute to the goal. So they gave more than one metric at the low, medium, and high. And again, the idea was different types of projects, trying to find a way that their impact could be differentiated. So that was another one that they came up with. Then we have some groups like water and sanitary, where we have 2 different types of projects within the group. Like in water, we have water plant projects and we have water distribution projects. And they are competing for water funds with each other. So we said their ability to contribute to sustainability is different. A plant project, we can literally measure, is it reducing energy load? Is it moderately reducing it? Is it significantly reducing it? But we can't say the same thing on a water distribution project. So they said, even though they're 2 different things, let's score the social equity as low, medium, high. That way, they're a slightly different metric, but each project has an opportunity to be evaluated towards contribution to a sustainability goal. And so we made a little dent. There were some more. I just picked some sample ones to say they're not a cookie cutter. Here's how we define. Like if we tried to say, does this project reduce greenhouse gas emissions? A lot of them couldn't possibly do it. Therefore, as a scoring metric, it's not terribly useful. But as next steps, we haven't tackled the group, particularly city-owned buildings, where energy is a very direct thing. Putting solar on city-owned buildings, reducing energy loads in the buildings, and so on. So Missy had introduced us to a group that wants to do a pilot with the city, and they have some very elaborate metrics related to carbon reduction and greenhouse gas emissions and all sorts. So we're going to do a pilot with our city-owned buildings and airports where we have actual physical building projects, and we can apply it in practice to the water and sewer plant projects, but it will probably be indirect because of that strange scoring thing. So this will be our first opportunity to drill down hard on the energy aspect itself for those groups. Transit wouldn't be much of a leap. Whatever works for city-owned buildings would work for the train station, but not for a queue jump lane. So we'll have some serious work to do on that. But that's our next step. And we continue to try and gather ideas from other communities on what are some of the metrics that they're using to measure. So we came from, to be honest, nothing at all when I first came here, to incorporating sustainability framework goals, to using some drilled down metrics for different groups, to continuing that process forward. So it's not perfect, but we've made, I think, fairly significant strides in trying to bring it in. And then the final piece, that's how we would incorporate it in the plan for the plan. But where the real work and real change can also come in is once a capital project makes it into the plan, that intervening at the design level to incorporate design metrics, materials choices, all those things that can affect, say, sustainability goals. And I believe out of this pilot that we're doing, that we will get a lot of excellent ideas that will be more on the implementation end. Because when a project goes in the CIP, it is not designed. We know what we want to, achieve. We're going to rebuild fire station number 4, but we haven't designed it, so we can't introduce detailed metrics in prioritization, but we certainly can once we start design. So hopefully that gives you an idea. I'm going to kill my share of where we've been, where we're going, and hope that helps a bit.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'd like to open things up for questions.
It's kind of a dry topic when that's all you hear, so
I have a few if no one else does. I didn't quite understand if different categories, I'm not asset categories, or I don't know if I'm using the right term, compete with each other in effect, even if there are dedicated funding mechanisms, for example, for a utility or something like that. Does something for stormwater compete with active transportation, for example, or are they all eventually in one big bucket competing against each other?
They really are discrete, with the exception that I was talking about, that general funds can jump across a few categories. But no, by accounting principles and how all these utilities are set up, water funds can't spend stormwater dollars or vice versa, or can't spend street dollars. So they're competing within their own revenue source against each other. So that's why the prioritization can be tailored. At that last mega level, where there's a handful of things that are capital that use general funds, it's mostly some of our dams are funded in part by general funds. City-owned buildings are heavily funded from general funds. And so technically there's a little bit in the water group that could be competing with the city-owned building project, but generally there's almost none of that. Each revenue source is designed to support that specific set of capital improvements with that revenue source.
Okay, thank you. That wasn't clear to me before. And the other question, well, actually I have two questions. So it's clear to me the various high, medium, lows, and the criteria that are used to define those. How does sustainability weights or scores fit into the overall scoring? So I assume they're being rated on other characteristics. And my recollection at one time was that sustainability was roughly 10% of the total. Is that still correct, or is that incorrect or been changed?
That's a good question. And it does differ from group to group. So the one part, I was trying not to go too far down in the weeds, but when a group is going through this new setup process, first they define the strategic values, sustainability or something being one of them. And then they do go through a weighting exercise. And it's actually probably one of the most powerful parts of the LVANT software, because the gentleman from University of Michigan who was really behind it has a PhD in decision making, and he uses pairwise comparison. It's like, which is more important, natural resources or condition, whatever, and everything gets rated on a higher, lower scale to each other. It helps people from trying to rig the system, so to speak. And when done, sustainability, whether or not they called it, in different groups, there's somewhere I think it ranks over 20%, where it's roughly equal to, say, if there's 5, the other ones. So it isn't the same in every group, but in general, it's higher than sustainability relatively counted under the count how many of the 16 you score. I definitely see a shift in thinking with the A20 goals and stuff, that people are ever more conscious, both as staff and as human beings, about the importance of that in spending your money. So it's not the same in everyone, but it's reasonably high in all of them.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions. Councilmember Briggs.
Thanks. I have one question and then one comment. So the question, you mentioned how equity be kind of being a measure of households in poverty. Is that kind of the only measure of equity that we have currently that we're using the prioritization score?
Yes, at present, it was the only one we could get some sort of agreement on and have a metric that we could have enough confidence in the statistics to use. But there's continued discussion, particularly in the transportation groups, as an example, as access to transportation as an equity issue. So I know some COGs got some metrics they're coming up with. So at present, it's the only one we've tackled, but we're very aware that there are other kinds of equity that are not economic equity. And that was the first example I could come up with that's been discussed.
Yeah, that's great. That's where my mind was going to, because, you know, obviously it's important to be thinking about the census tract, but particularly in transportation, that sort of access to transportation and having continuity and recognition that transportation is the second highest cost in household budgets. So good to know that we're thinking about that. And then my comment is just, I just wanted to say how much gratitude and appreciation I have for the work that you've done for the city. I've been previously served on planning commission, as you know, and have been watching these presentations for a long time. And your positivity and your approach to trying to improve the process and advocate for better software and better approaches is definitely noticed and very much appreciated. And I know it's going to be a big loss for the city. So thanks for all the work that you've done over the years.
Thank you, Councilmember. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Hookham.
Good evening. Debbie, congratulations on your retirement. Good luck on your second career. You know, you're just starting. So, you know, your next stop's going to be a good one, I think. I have a two-parter for you. The first part of the question, it seems like this new process you've embarked on is a little bit more of a collaborative approach where the project team basically does the scoring and then you just have an output that you're looking at and comparing. I'm involved in a lot of sustainability programs with infrastructure behind the scenes, and we actually use it more as a screening tool, not so much as a collaboration tool or a scoring tool, wherein we're looking to eliminate projects. If they're not providing some sustainable benefit to the community, it just falls off the map completely. So a thing like avoiding resurfacing a road. If you can avoid that's a huge source of carbon. It may not be positive for the future. We may have other forms of roadway use in the future. Maybe bikes or other traffic don't need to resurface. Use it as a deferral tool. Has that been considered? Is it ever part of the process? I'd be curious on that. And then secondarily, maybe in the same breath, can a citizen that has some experience in this actually participate in the next round of revisions? Do you know where that's headed? Because we'd love to help.
On the first question, no, we have not used it as an elimination because the fact that the project has been identified kind of by default says there's a need to address. So rather than saying, nope, we're not going to do it at all, using your road example, one thing we're already doing is drilling down hard on the right fix at the right time philosophy and trying to do smaller fixes earlier in the life of the pavement to avoid those big fixes that are expensive. They're, carbon unfriendly, all of those things. But we as, public sector dollars saying it doesn't meet something, so we're not going to do it at all is not an approach we've taken. On the second thing, any input on these, kind of changes and criteria are also always welcome. And if they're sustainability related, probably sending them through Missy as your principal staff contact would probably be the best way to figure out. And she would work with Kayla Coleman, my replacement, to see how in this process that could fit in. But any more expertise that is helping come up with these kind of metrics that people already have. Yay. So.
Any other questions? I have two quick ones, hopefully for Missy. Missy, I know what an A20 strategy is. I'm not sure I know what an A2 resilience strategy is.
We don't have them. They were the A20 strategies.
Okay.
They were the 7 overarching, really the 6 substantive. Yeah.
Okay, good. I want to make sure I understood that. And then the other quick question was, it sounds like you've done a little bit of benchmarking on how sustainability is worked into other municipality CIPs. And that's what Deb referred to, where you provided some information about how another governmental entity is doing that. And that's what's leading to these pilots that Deb mentioned to. Is that correct?
Ish. So the pilot that Deb mentioned actually came from a very different conversation. It's someone who has worked overseas to help people integrate sustainability kind of into their capital planning process and is looking for kind of refinement in the US market. They have a tool. And so we're more bleeding edge of that to figure out how this actually works and could be applied within our system. To your question, I mean, we constantly are trying to figure out, like, how do we do this better? And I think Deb hit on this really well. And she always has to remind me that the CIP is but one process. The actual design of the projects is really where we can go deep, hard, and fast in a lot of selection. And for what it's worth, the sustainability team sits on most of the working groups and the assets. So we have representatives who, we don't do water system planning, but we're there asking questions to help prioritize the projects that they're bringing forward.
Okay, great. Again, thanks, Deb. Have fun in retirement, and maybe we'll see you sitting on this side in your
Never know.
order commission someday or something like that. Not necessarily for Ann Arbor, but who knows what, some other entity.
Well, I appreciate it, and I'll let you get on to your solar farm questions. So thank you so much. I'm going to step out.
Have a good rest of your evening.
All right, thanks.
I just wanted to welcome Cole. Cole, thanks for joining us. And we are now moving on our agenda to a presentation on the solar installation on the Wheeler Center solar park. And Missy's going to present that. And looks like we also have someone from DTE joining us. So Missy, we'll let you take it away and make the introductions.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, everyone. Excited to be here today. And I will start by saying the project that I have always referred to as landfill solar does have an official name. So you saw it on the agenda as the Wheeler Center Solar Park. So that is the name broadly that actually has been moved through DTE system. And apologies, I hear tears in the background. So we will likely have a visitor momentarily. In terms of the presentation, we're just going to walk through some general slides. I know we have some comments. We're going to try to address most of the comments and questions that we heard. We might miss a few, but we'll grab them in the Q&A. So I want to thank Mr. Rivet from DTE for joining us. We're going to tag team the presentation. And Mike, just very quickly, do you want me to elevate Randy or Kayla into the panel?
I think we're good for now. We can pull them in should we need them.
Sounds great. Perfect. So let me just pull up my slides for everybody. Well, welcome. This project is moving slow and fast in all ways. It is the very first project that I took on when I joined the city, and I'm excited to see where we are today. It's been through a lot of different iterations. And so for our time together, we just want to talk briefly more for members of the public about how this project aligns with A20. We get a lot of questions about why collaborate. And so we want to address those and talk pretty openly about why we chose this path, about the process that we've been through, give you kind of an overview of the project broadly, talk a little bit about subscriptions. And guess what? There's new developments because there always are. Otherwise, this work would be easy, and it constantly is hard. So we'll share a little bit about kind of what's happening within the landscape. So to kick it off, I'm going to start with A20, which I know we're all familiar with. We have 7 strategies. There's really 6 substantive, and the 7th is a cross-cut that covers every single topic, things like equity, community engagement, metrics. So the 6 substantives, the very first strategy is about powering our community with 100% renewable energy. And under that are 4 actions that were identified. Action 3, I'll go in reverse order, is to start a community solar program. That is not legal in Michigan. We can't just start it because we want to. So that came up. Of course, we're pushing for community solar legislation. It really, really matters, but we don't have it today. So reframing community solar, if we were to do it, would be illegal unless we worked with our utility. So community solar is one of our programs, our actions that we want to see promoted. Action 4 is explicitly this project, the landfill solar project, which was called out in the plan, and kind of, if you've read A20, you know there's an entire section on these two different elements. So our goal was to see both of these move forward, and we had an opportunity presented us to do that. So I'm gonna talk about that kind of opportunity in the framing of why collaborate, and then I'm gonna kick it over to Mike. In terms of why collaborate, one, the site is complex. Right? Landfills are fabulous locations to build solar from an intellectual standpoint, from an environmental standpoint, I think from a land use standpoint. And there is a reason they are not developed frequently. They are complicated. There are a lot of rules and requirements. We are taking notes. We often joke that we're going to write a paper, maybe even do like a Netflix movie special on all the things that keep coming up on this project. You know, there was a box turtle that was seen in 1906, and we have to do special things because no one has seen it since 1906, but maybe it's still there. Who knows, right? So there's just a whole bunch of additional layers of complication associated with this project. But that doesn't mean not do it, right? As people have commented a number of times, we don't have a lot of undeveloped land in the city. And we do have energy goals and energy principles, and of course A20, that ask us to reduce emissions and to reduce emissions fast, to prioritize local where we can. And this is the plot of land that we have available to us to do scale. And so we keep pushing through and trying to find ways and navigating kind of that terrain broadly. So this is a complex site, and having a partner with us is important. We want community solar, right? It's one of the actions in A20. And right now, the only way to do any kind of community solar program is with our utility. We got agreement in the VGP, or Section 61 filing, for this project, with the city being the anchor tenant, meaning we'll be the off-taker. And that's how we got community solar to move forward through the project. And we've been working on designing that kind of in lockstep with DTE. What's also really neat is that we can connect to DTE's distribution lines. So you heard some callers mention that, yeah, we did pay for some of the initial studies. Every development pays for those studies. We, however, because we thought we might have some room on the DTE distribution lines, not the transmission lines, we were able to do an assessment, and the answer was we did. There is room on those lines with some modest updates, which are built into the project costs. But that means a lot of things. One, it means we are not in a long wait line. The ITC to get on to MISO market and the transmission lines, that is a really long list. We're talking years, and not one or two, many, many years, because lots and lots of projects are coming on. So you have to go back to the end of the queue. It costs a lot more money. The studies are you have to do additional studies in this process. So we knew if the DT distribution system wasn't capable of taking this, we were going to have to go and get in the queue if we wanted this process to move forward. And because it's in the distribution network, the energy we're producing is likely to be used locally, right? It's not likely to go somewhere else in the big transmission system. And then another reason is we care about scalability, transferability, and being a leader in this space. This allows us to demonstrate what's possible through multi-institutional collaboration. And that's not just with the city and DTE. Pittsfield Township has been beside us in this project. You know, this land that we're talking about was and is in a PUD with Pittsfield. And so we've been working with them on the design, doing public engagement within the community in Pittsfield Township. And Pittsfield Township is excited to be one of the off-takers of the project itself. And so there's lots of collaborations that are coming forward. And I would be unequivocally remiss if I didn't note that in the Section 61 agreement, which is that third bullet point, the VGP, we also designed this program and got approval to make a low-income solar offering an option. What this means is we can, in fact, buy down the cost of a number of subscriptions so that people don't have to pay the premium. They get the credit on their bill, and they can subscribe. Low income eligible qualified people can subscribe. So we've been working on 2 mechanisms to make that manifest, although we're open to lots and lots of other ideas if folks have them. One is DT is working on a low income solar program broadly right now, where people can contribute funds to a low income, this pool of money, and then projects get financed and the credits for those projects go to different low income residents in their distribution network or in their service territory. The other is we've been exploring at the city buying down. If I got hypothetically $2 million in funding somewhere, if I get a grant, can I put it down towards that project and reserve $2 million worth of output for residents? And so we're working on all of those structures in collaboration with DT, but that's part of what excites me about this project too. So kind of big picture bullet points. We don't have to stand up new infrastructure by doing this, which is a long time. And if speed is a criteria, which we all said it was when we adopted the energy principles and criteria, this allows us to move fast to get renewable energy on the grid. It is additional. This does not count to DTE's credit for their renewable energy portfolio in terms of like their requirement to meet. This is in a separate section, a separate filing. So this is new. This would not be built if we did not bring this project forward, because it is not, Mike can share more about that, but it's not at the scale that DT is looking at. It's a complicated site. So why would you start at this site? And so it is fundamentally additional to what would move forward. And it's the only way we can get community solar. So we're excited about the project, despite all of its complications. Most of the time I'm excited about this project. Sometimes I cry a little bit in my sleep. But Mike, do you want to take over? And I'm going to go on mute for a dog bark.
Great. Thank you, Missy. And I do not enjoy following Missy because she has so much energy to bring to the table and is so enthusiastic about this project, but I will try my best to keep that going. DT is extremely excited to be a partner on this. And Missy talked a bit about the Section 61 and Renewable Energy Plan settlement, which Ann Arbor was a part of. That was a really important step to this process. I know a lot of you have read news articles and MLive articles and et cetera around kind of this process along the way from 2019. And so we partnered before we actually had approval from the MPSC to move forward on this. We started partnering early to really drive down to the details and understand, is this feasible? What can we put there? How much would it cost? Can it tie into the grid? And so a lot of that legwork was taken on by both DT on the cost side, but also Ann Arbor as a partnership in the beginning. And so coming out of that settlement, we were able to really have the approval to move forward on a framework. And so that framework laid out how we were going to go out and bid this. And it was going to be an open RFP. We brought in a lot of requirements from the city to make sure that we were aligned with how the city would like to conduct RFPs, and those aligned well with us. So there really wasn't any complications there. We did issue an EPC, which is Engineer Procurement Construction RFP in October 2021. And what that really is we had a tabletop design. That's what a lot of people saw. Numbers were put out. You saw some drawings. That tabletop design needs to be taken into a full final design. We need to go through and do finalize permitting, finalize the electrical interconnection, and et cetera to make this into a reality. And then obviously procure and construct it. And so we issued that RFP in October 2021. It was originally a 4-week RFP. We extended it a 5th week as we saw more folks coming into the mix, and they were asking for a week extension. So we were able to give that week extension, and we received a great amount of bids, 10 bids from very qualified EPC contractors. We were extremely happy from the DT side to see the names and the size of companies that wanted to come in and compete on this. And I think a lot of them were just excited about the project. It's a large local project. It's not the largest of projects that you'll see in solar. A lot of the universal scale projects are 100 megawatts, 200 megawatts, but this is really unique, high publicity, and a really cool aspect with the landfill. We did go through and typical to our RFP, which aligns with MPSC approved processes. We did review those and went down to a round 2, where we brought those select 4 bids into conversations and really dialed into their bids. Currently, we are down to 1 single EPC contractor that's going to provide the best value for this project. And we're currently in the middle of negotiating with them to finalize that agreement, which would ultimately decide the pricing and give us enough information for us to work with the city to understand whether or not we can move forward on this and at what price point. So looking at the project, and let me minimize what I can see here so I can see the slides as well. So looking at the project, you can see 4 arrays here, and I'll talk through kind of the specifics around those arrays. This is a 20 megawatt project. I know there were some questions around, it used to be 24. We heard it was a touch larger. We did end up, you'll see there's not any solar arrays on the floating or on the reservoir. There's no more floating solar. Missy, I think, can speak a touch more to that as Ann Arbor was pretty well involved on that portion as well. But it seemed like we were not going to get the approvals needed from our regulatory bodies in the environmental side of the house to have that go forward. And so it would have been a fascinating thing from an engineering perspective and sustainability perspective, but the decision was made to drop that portion of it. So what we're left with is 20 megawatts, and 20 megawatts is jammed really tight in there. This is about 70 acres, and on 70 acres, 20 megawatts is no small feat. As you can see with the row spacing, if you're familiar with solar, it is tightly packed, which is great for the city. It's great for that dual use land. I'm really excited about that piece, as you're really getting as much value as you can out of that portion of land. Some other discussion points I want to just touch on here. Financing of the project. DT will finance this project. This will be a utility capital project, just like any other generation project we have. So there is no capital output from the city, from Pittsfield Township, or any subscribers. And so we have the ability to finance this and offer it at a subscription rate. And that subscription rate is that levelized cost of energy that you'll hear in some of the news articles, and Missy and myself have talked about. And that's really, it's a cost recovery mechanism that we put into a tariff, just like we would with a migrant power project, if you're familiar with our voluntary renewable energy portfolio. We do expect to qualify for 26% ITC, investment tax credit, that is. And that is being baked into the pricing as we're currently working through it right now. So I know there are some questions around whether or not we qualify and whether or not that would be passed on to the city and to the subscribers. It will be. And then additionality. I won't touch too much on that. I think Missy did a great job in talking about that. The approved megawatts that came out of the renewable energy plan settlement, those megawatts are for customer demand. Those are for our voluntary renewable energy program. The city of Ann Arbor happens to be one of those customers demanding megawatts. And so those are incremental, they're additional, they're not going to be built otherwise without customer demand. And just talking a brief more about the slide here. So construction is expected to start in early 2023. What we're looking at is a commercial operation date of end of 2023. And that would mean that we would expect generation in early 2024. As we finalize the contract with the engineering procurement construction firm, that will solidify that schedule a little more. But the expectation is to finalize the construction end of 2023 and have generation ready for 2024. And then looking at the picture on the right, you'll see the 4 arrays. A, B, and C are arrays that are sitting on greenfield development. So those will be your traditional post-mounted solar arrays. Array D is on the capital infill. So what you'll see with array D is there will be no ground penetration there. Those will be ballast mounted, basically sitting on concrete blocks that would be on top of the cap of the landfill. So no penetration of that.
And just quickly, I want to add a few questions that I saw come in to how come we're not more on the landfill regulation. Basically what ends up happening, and we designed separately, then we found a nesting bird, so we had to downsize. So we're really maximizing every, it feels like foot that we have any viable solar potential on site, making sure we're not interfering with other uses, especially natural system uses that are on site. There was also a question about pollinator habitat, and we are working really hard with DNR to make sure we can have that. And you can imagine the cap landfill is really regulated. There are a lot of things we cannot do on that landfill. There are more potential in the greenfield sites, but even in that space, because of permitting issues, we're committed to doing as much pollinator habitat as we can. I just can't tell you today what that looks like because we're still working with DNR to figure out specifically what species would be allowed and when we're going to be able to plant kind of broadly. And then Mike teed up no floating solar. once again, here was another one we learned. This water is considered waters of the state because of how big it is, which means it's regulated by the state, which means the only way we would be able to put floating solar on it is by demonstrating there was nowhere within, I believe it was a 5-mile radius in the city that solar could go, and it had to be this spot. We can't, right? Because there are lots of places solar could go. So instead of fighting that fight, we decided we were going to take that off of the project, and we're working instead with Eagle to try to change those rules, because that's prohibitive for a lot of potentially good use cases going forward. So it doesn't mean we can't eventually add floating solar. It just means for the sake of speed, and that fight, that was a fight that we were going to take in a different direction for another day. So just wanted to share why that fell. Mike, you want to take subscriptions?
Yeah, we'll do. So what this will look like to everyone, including the city, Pittsfield Township, and subscribers. So this is going to be a subscription model like Migrant Power. As I mentioned before, DT will finance the entire project, so there is no capital outlay. So what will happen is we'll mold this into a levelized cost energy subscription model. And the way that works, if you're not subscribed to Migrant Power, is you have a subscription price, and that's based on the levelized cost energy, basically the cost of the project. Drives that, and that's it'll be $1 or a cent per kilowatt hour, and you'll also receive the financial benefits of the project. So that's the community solar aspect, right? You subscribe into it, you're paying for a portion of the project, but in return you get the benefits from it. And the benefits come in terms of a market value of the capacity credit and the energy. And so that's what we've been doing with Migrant Power. It's an approved method, and so that's the piece where inside the settlement, the MPSC, our Michigan Public Service Commission, was very generous in approving this as well. It's already there, and it's a defined method that's put out there for these types of projects, so we don't have any regulatory risk in getting this approved through them, or we have low regulatory risk in that nature. As we've talked about before, DT is going to be solely responsible for the operations and the maintenance of the site. And what's neat about this is because it is a subscription model on a cent per kilowatt hour or $1 per megawatt hour, if it doesn't produce, we don't recover cost. And so the onus is on us to keep this thing up and running, to keep this thing pushing out as many green electrons as possible. And that's really a cool aspect from the customer side is DT is on the hook to keep it running.
Thanks, Mike. So, new development, because this work is never easy. Some of you may know, and I think actually, Chuck, you could probably talk about this more than the rest of us, that the federal government recently opened an investigation into potential tariff penalties, pretty significant penalties for the solar market. And there is a lot that we do not know. It is moving very fast. What we do know is that this is a potential reflection moment. Some are calling it an existential crisis for the solar industry and for those of us trying to move renewable energy forward. This is, like days in the development. So we're all waiting to figure out what this is going to mean for all kinds of projects broadly. We are seeing industry-wide cancellations. Costs are escalating on projects because of this uncertainty and this potential 200% plus tariff. That's a really big deal. And we don't have a sense on if it's fully grandfathered, if it's going forward, what's in, what's out. It's quite a complex landscape. So we're sharing that what we've taken the stance on is we're committed to this project. We are going to continue getting as much information. Literally, last week we were getting calls by the hour, trying to figure out what was happening within the market. We're committed to moving the project forward. We are waiting on a little bit more clarity about what's included in this investigation, what the tariffs are likely to be. And we are obviously looking for as any panels sitting on a shelf somewhere that happen to be made in the US, because that's great. But the US is a very small manufacturer of solar panels. And so this is painful reality that we're sort of in at the moment. But I want to reiterate that all of us, we've had multiple calls between all the project partners, and we're committed to this project. We just have to learn more about this investigation. Mike, is there anything you want to add?
No, Miss, I think you covered it. It's a very dynamic marketplace, and there's a lot of supply demand shortages and risk in terms of this tariff. So a lot of uncertainty out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to kind of close out for next steps, we brought the project forward to you. I know we brought the resolution because our initial intent was to be at council on May 5th, and we had already we'd prepped council members, we'd prepped the Michigan Public Service Commission that we were coming shortly thereafter. And we have a little bit more time as we're seeing the impacts of that last slide in this investigation that's taking place. But we wanted to bring this project to you, hear your thoughts. Should this be something you're supportive of, that's great. We can move forward as soon as we get clarity on what's happening with the investigation. But just so you know what comes after, we will go to City Council for consideration of the project. I don't have a date certain, again, because of the last slide, but we will come as soon as we can come and feel really confident with the pricing mechanisms. We will have a public information session for folks to kind of listen, learn more, share feedback. We then file with the Michigan Public Service Commission for formal approval. We've already briefed them and prepped them. We've answered questions, we hope. And I think our soft expectation is that moves pretty quickly because they're really supportive of the project. And then we break ground. And while we're doing that, we're recruiting people to sign up into the program, or just letting them know that it's even an option to sign up into the program. And then we produce and we reduce emissions. So that's the timeline kind of broadly. And I'm sorry I can't give you certain dates. I wish I could. I could have 2 weeks ago, but the world is a changing. So with that, I'm going to stop and see what other questions you have.
So questions, and there have to be some, or maybe I might ask Mike and Missy. You received 2 emails. Hopefully you have those emails in front of you or can pull them up. I did my best to sort of look through them to see that you have addressed most of them, but I'm wondering if you can look at those, and rather than us going through the formalities of calling on people and everything like that, if you can see if there's anything that stands out to you that maybe wasn't covered, that members of the community or members of the commission already submitted in advance. That just might be more efficient.
Yeah, you're going to see us reading them, I think, because we tried to integrate them.
So I'll ask one question. It sounds like DTE is responsible for operations and maintenance. Does that mean DTE is also assuming liability, or what liabilities are resting with the city and which, if any, are lying with DTE? That was one thing important to us, and also in terms of advising City Council that we thought was important. How's that being handled, the split of liability?
Mike, you want to take that? I'm getting the next one ready.
Sure. So John, thank you for the question. So we are in final negotiations as well with the special contract, which would govern this agreement. So I can't speak exactly to how it's going to end, but DT as being the developer, we would take on the risk for the development on top of the cap landfill. The duration and longevity of that risk is obviously going to be something that's in the contract, but as you can imagine, the developer would be responsible for what happens on that landfill as we're constructing the solar array.
Mm-hmm.
I see another question that there's 2. I'm sorry, John, I can't see you because I'm looking at the questions.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Did I cut you off?
That's better you look at the questions than me.
No, not at all. If I cut you off, just please tell me. No, that wasn't intentional.
Go ahead.
There was kind of a 2-part question. One about the cost, and the truth is I can't answer that, right? Because the market is topsy-turvy at the moment. So I can't, I know people want to know, I just can't give you that answer. The other was, does the city reserve the right?
Before you leave that topic, I assume at some point there might be an out that the city
That's where I was going.
to take, as well as DTE, and say that this project is no longer viable, or we cannot provide the cost that makes a project like this make sense. And at that point, there would be an exit ramp, and there would be no further cost to the city or to DTE.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you for taking, that's where I was going to go. The second part of one of the questions was that, like, what if the price is too high? So you heard Mike also say that they were still in final negotiations with the EPC, the contractor. So like final pricing is like being negotiated, and then the market adds that uncertainty. So that's random. But we reserve the right in all the contracts to walk away if the pricing was too high. Where we were 2 weeks ago wasn't. I mean, it was reasonable. Here we are now. We've had lots of conversations about what too high means and like, what is it at? Like 200% of the cost of an asset, like we're out. Like we all know that. Like DT can't justify spending that much money on an asset. We can't justify spending that much money on an asset. But is that the truth? So to the essence of and the core of your question, yes, both parties have the right to walk away if the pricing is unreasonable. And we have agreed to kind of eat our own costs. We've all put in a lot of time and effort that have not been reimbursed, paid for up front. Right. We've agreed. If in good faith, we walk away.
Okay.
I don't want to walk away, John. Don't make me walk away. Like, just fix the markets, please.
I'll just ask a couple of questions at the top of my head. I've printed off, but I think this is pretty clear. DTE owns the asset, right? So it's not, the city is not owning the asset. We continue to own the land, obviously, yes, but DTE owns the asset, right? Okay. Let's see. And how is the power generated going to be shared between the various entities? I think originally part of the energy generated was going to be essentially offsetting or going to Pittsfield Township for their municipal operations. Is that still the part of the three-way contract?
Yeah, so it's not the contract. Each contract is individual with DTE, but what we've negotiated in the special contract that goes before the Public Service Commission is Pittsfield Township gets the first megawatt of production. So they would, roughly, they would subscribe. I know I see Mike's face because it's more nuanced than that, but generally speaking, they get the right in the first kind of right of refusal within that system. And then others subscribe, and Ann Arbor is effectively the cleanup. We come in whatever as a city is not subscribed, and we offtake, which is why hence how it sort of works for community subscriptions. Mike, what do you want to fix?
No, not fix anything. I'll elaborate just to touch on the subscription. So it is, it's going to be set up as a percentage-based subscription for everyone except for Ann Arbor. Ann Arbor, as Missy said, will be the remaining amount of megawatt hours not subscribed to. But Pittsfield Township has a section in a right to subscribe to 85% of their load, which would, plus the 15% of renewable portfolio standard, would take them to 100% renewable energy.
So that makes sense. I mean, basically, once the project is a go ahead and we can lock in the contracts, and that includes also for the panels and everything, know what the price is, there's essentially no risk that the energy generated is not going to be used. I mean, you have clear off takers in every single case where Ann Arbor sweeps up anything that may not be taken. Okay, good, that's clear. I'm going to recognize anybody else that has a question. If you want to raise your hand. Missy and Mike, is there anything else to see? I'm looking.
I'm looking. I mean, I think we hit most of them, but people might want to go in more depth. I do want to add, Mike talked about the financing that DT is financing, and there's a lot of benefits to that. One also being we're not taking on more debt that frees up municipal debt that we can apply towards other projects, whether that's affordable housing, infrastructure projects, et cetera. So that's another thing that we haven't touched on yet. Want to drive home, we're not stopping with community solar. And I know I mentioned that community solar legislation at the state, everyone at DT knows this. We talk about it all the time. That is something we care a lot about, but it's not legal now. And I think what else?
I had someone from the community email me today, had looked at the presentation, and they had a question about the power generated. I think it was 35 million megawatt hours per year. And the question was, that seemed high to this individual. And I'm just curious, is there tracking, or are these bifacial, or what kind of things are we doing to get that high level of generation?
Good questions. Go for it, Mike.
Sure. So it's 35,000 megawatt hours.
Oh, sorry.
Is expected in the first year of generation. And they are likely going to be bifacial panels. They will not be tracking. And the reason they won't be tracking is the size, the land constraint we have. Your best bet of getting value out of it is to jam pack as many fixed tilt solar panels in there as possible.
Very good.
The tracking just takes a lot more land.
Two people that know a lot more than this than I do with their hands up, so I'm going to let them pose some questions. Commissioner Hookham.
I could go into a lot of questions, but as typical, I will not. I will be kind tonight and just stick to a one or two. I was going to ask kind of about John's question, but maybe to carry it a step further, is there a PV-SYS model or some model of the infrastructure that might be available?
Would you mind asking it again? We got some feedback, so I just want to make sure we heard that. Okay.
Yeah, I got real bad feedback here. I assume that DTE modeled this in a couple different ways. It's not single axis track, but it's fixed tilt. But there's a whole lot of other modeling parameters that we look into, and things like density, pitch, two portrait, two landscape, all kinds of ways to stack these to create the density that you're doing. How much exercise was undertaken to fit that? It sounds like a lot, Mike, and just kind of give us a feedback on, is this P50, P70, P90? What kind of output conditions are you looking at?
Yeah, thank you. So the part of the short list work that we did with the 4 EPC vendors that made it through the first round was we did refine how they were designing it and asked them to run PV-SYS models and provide those to us based on two criteria, one being optimize and levelized cost of energy, but the second one being output. And so we're really looking to maximize the output on that portion of land with the lowest cost of energy possible. I don't recall what the probability confidence interval is, and I would guess once we strike the deal and we move forward, the PV-SYS models could be made available upon request.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kerber, with all the bluebirds in the background.
Actually, they're swallows, tree swallows. Anyway, yeah, as far as the community solar offering, is it going to be, I mean, you already have My Green Power that you offer as an alternative. Is this only going to be made available to residents of the city and Pittsfield Township, people in the county? What is the area that is going to be offered in?
Yeah. It was like a race to unmute. The way that we have talked about this is it's offered to anyone in DT service territory. Now, from our standpoint, like the city's standpoint, we're going to be working really closely with Pittsfield to make sure our residents know about it and have the chance to subscribe kind of first in line. But anyone in the service territory will have the opportunity to sign up for it.
So it'll have to compete with My Green Power.
Yeah, I mean, you could think of it that way.
Could it cannibalize My Green Power?
I don't think I understand how that would even happen. Like supplant demand for My Green Power, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm on My Green Power and I'd rather be on this, then does that mean that My Green Power gets reduced and this goes up? There, you have switching.
Like theoretically it could, but I think demand is high for renewables such that is unlikely to be the outcome. I think what's more likely is more renewables get built because it demonstrates people have a high desire for local renewable energy systems. But I guess theoretically, Mike,
I completely agree with you, Missy. It could technically cannibalize some of the My Green Power customers that are, and we have a good portion that are living in the city of Ann Arbor. But I don't see that as being a concern. Our program is expanding every day, and we're running out of capacity. So adding more capacity for customers, to subscribe, this is a complimentary offering. So I view this as a really good addition to the program, and it's local. All of our projects are Michigan based, but this is a little closer than some other ones. O'Shea was really close to folks in Detroit and right off of 96. But yeah, I think it's just another complimentary offering that helps us increase consumption across.
Thank you.
I guess one question I think for members of the community that might still be open is an explanation, Missy, from you possibly of when this project was started, there was not even the idea of an SEU. Oh, I see that we have questions from Edie and Ember, but I'll go ahead since I'm halfway through. There was not even the idea of an SEU. Now there's this idea of an SEU. It's not a reality. It hasn't been approved by city council for that matter. It's not funded. You know, there's lots of steps with that. But at least there's this dangling idea of an SEU out there. And people are, I think, projecting that idea onto this project and thinking, well, why wouldn't we take this as an asset? And I think you've addressed this, but maybe I'll let you address it one more time so it's clear to everybody. Why not associate this with the SEU? And you talked about speed and things like that, but I'm wondering if there's anything else that you've thought of in the meantime that really addresses that question.
Yeah, so there are many ways to come at that one. We don't have an SEU, right? So while that is something we are actively, you will hear in staff updates, starting to get feedback on, very exciting. That's not an instrument that we have. Second is speed. Third, even if we do have an SEU, we don't project community solar until much later in the process. And the point is to do distributed systems, rooftop solar and storage systems first, very limited poles and wires, because the goal is not distribution, the goal is generation. And so this would not come quick in that process. So the speed plays itself in multiple ways, like speed of SEU, speed of emissions reduction, speed of renewables on the grid. And then the last thing, I've been really open, Mike knows this, we talk about it with them, that if the community moves in the direction, this is an asset that could be an asset that the SEU acquires. That's just real. I won't pretend that that's loved by everyone, but it's an asset that exists that would exist that doesn't today. And so in my mind, I don't understand why we would wait if the objective is to get as much renewables as we can on the grid. And this is a way to do that.
And I think the other thing is that we don't really have a load that we could connect to. I mean, people have mentioned, well, we could do vehicle charging, we could do bus charging, the city doesn't have buses. We don't have a bus facility there. We don't have a University of Michigan bus system there. So there's not really, as I understand it, and I'm asking you and others to challenge this, but it seems to me there isn't a practical load that we can transmit to. And, even if we had an SEU, there are going to be people scattered all around the city. And I don't know how we'd essentially transfer that power to all of these distributed demand points. You'd
have to set up a really intense distribution system to do that. And it is true, like we have looked at how to maximize on site, and we've thought about, we're getting our 2 first electric refuse trucks. Can we set up a charging station there? But it operationally doesn't make sense given how the trucks come and go. And so that doesn't quite work. Wheeler is one of the sites for the solar project that council funded through ARPA funding. And we have it at a 97% offset. We don't have usage on the site that makes sense, and that's really close by. It's kind of the push and the pull of the most viable land that we have for something like this just isn't next to our heavy users.
Great. Mr. Juneau.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, in the fact sheet on the landfill solar and in a lot of the coverage, it looks like they are referring to this as something within the My Green Power program. So is that not the case? And are we just kind of, or it is a separate entity?
Yeah, Mike, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can take it over, and feel free to chime in if you have a different take on it. So the My Green Power program is our umbrella brand over our voluntary renewable energy program, which is normally referred to as Section 61, which is just the legislation that enables it. So to DT, this looks and feels the exact same as any of our other My Green Power projects, except for it is a project that's priced specifically based on one location, as opposed to our My Green Power portfolio is cost averaged together. And as we bring new projects online, we bring that pricing down as projects are cheaper. And if they're not cheaper, then we will probably build another pricing portfolio that starts off with a different price point. But the goal of My Green Power portfolio is really just cost averaging and keep everyone's rates as cost effective as possible.
Commissioner McCoy.
sorry, just really quickly adding on to that last piece is that that is right. Like from how DT is thinking about it, from our perspective, yes, and is how I would respond. That community solar, if you look at NRL's definition, there isn't one flavor of community solar. There are multiple different manifestations and it works in different regulatory contexts, right? Minneapolis is a different construct and a different ability to be able to move than we have here, which is different than what's happening in Massachusetts, but they're all sort of framed broadly. For us, this is about the community being able to make some decisions about how and where and kind of the systems that it's constructing to be able to power its operations or its lives. So that's a really important kind of piece to us, is that co-design and being at the table, actually figuring out what systems look like and getting the benefit of those systems, but also bearing the cost of those systems, right? Like that's part of the equation of the project.
Thank you. Commissioner McCoy.
Yeah, thank you. I have two questions. I guess I'll ask the first one, this one first, because it relates to Edie and Larry's comments about Mind Green Power. I'm just curious, Mike, if you could talk about like the current demand for Mind Green Power relative to its capacity. So I'm curious how like adding this project to that, may influence that. Like if it's likely that a lot of people outside of Ann Arbor and our marketing will want to take it up, for example. I'll start there and I'll add my second one after that.
Sure. Yeah, the demand is unprecedented for Mind Green Power. We, as shown in the Section 61 settlement that we talked about, we asked for another 300, 400 plus megawatts to support demand. We're currently oversubscribed in terms of large commercial customers, which is great. And that's really the way the program was set up, was to pull the subscriptions in or the contracts in first, and then go out, ask for approval, and build those projects to come. Because the mechanism is there to just completely fulfill demand as it comes in. We do have some opening in our smaller non-contracted program, which is what residential and small commercial would subscribe to. That is quickly filling up. We in the settlement, we had a small update to the program that allowed us to blend all of our projects together so that small customers, residential customers, and large customers all buy into that same portfolio. Which is a really great deal for our small customers and residential customers. And it's driving the price point down, and it's really bringing a lot of demand in. So this project will continue to push that. I think what we're seeing here is there's more to it than just price. Price is a big driver for a lot of folks, but there's some folks that really like that locality and the community solar aspect of being able to see it, feel it, and know the electrons are being pushed to your distribution grid.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks. And now I have a follow-up question. So I actually have 3 questions. So Missy, you had mentioned that the city will do a lot of advertising to try to, make sure that local residents know about this new opportunity. So I'm curious, are we going to be able to access this exclusively first? Or is it just that we'll be able to get ahead in marketing, before other people have the opportunity to fill it up? Or will it be open to everyone and we're just hoping our marketing means that residents will get to it first?
Yeah, good question. We know about it before everyone else knows about it. So the way we thought about kind of the initial subscriptions is once the Public Service Commission approves it, it won't be available for other people to subscribe to yet because it won't be listed anywhere, right? It's not producing, but we can start forming the wait list by doing the outreach and the engagement through the city and in tandem with Pittsfield Township. So that's the way we thought about it. Although now I'm intrigued about thinking about exclusive rights. I think our lawyers will kill me if I come back with another edit to our contract, but I'm going to hold that thought. So thank you for it.
Okay, thanks. And then my other unrelated question was just that, because DTE did the request for proposals, I know you walked through the elements that were a part of that from DTE's perspective, but I'm just curious if you could speak to, I guess this is a question for Missy, how that compares to the new request for proposals process that we just enacted. I know the timing is so that, I don't think this would have fallen under the new law anyways, had I never done it, but I'm just curious how they compare to our new policy for that.
Full alignment. In fact, DT is more aggressive than what the city has because we can't, they can have requirements that we can't have as a private entity. So if you're thinking about like the responsible contractor work, yep, it all made its way, all that language made its way through the contracting process. And then they took our non-discrimination clauses. They basically took everything else that we have too. And that was part of the language in the contract. Everyone had to prove every better that they were in adherence with those policies.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? So, Mike, I want to thank you and the DTE team for partnering with us. And I'm sure Missy put you through the ringer. And we did a little bit of that tonight, both you and Missy. Missy, again, thanks for your comments. I think, unless I see any other hands raised, that we can move on to the resolution. And what I would like to point out is we attempted to go through all the questions that were proposed both by commissioners as well as in the email from A2P2, and we may have missed the one or the other question, but this is not the only hurdle. And we saw that there are several next steps, and this will also have to go eventually to council. And so if there's something really important that's been missed, I would just say to members of the community as well as to members of the commission that we have an opportunity to weigh in with our questions and concerns before this finally goes through. So this is not the one and last opportunity for us to pose questions and make sure that we're doing the right thing in the interests of the city as well as voters and property owners here in Ann Arbor. So thanks very much for tonight's presentation. Missy, do you want to move on then to the next agenda point, which is the resolution of support?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to emphasize too that we put this together assuming we were on the timeline to go to council at an upcoming meeting. I think realistically, we could view this like normal resolutions, that this is just the first time kind of considering and getting general feedback, and we can bring it back if that's fine with you, Chair, because I don't think I'm going to be standing in front of Councilmember Briggs and Regina on the 5th with a project and the markets have sorted themselves out. But if I'm wrong, I apologize in advance and I'm so excited. But yeah, so maybe
well,
we just
I'll leave that to the conversation. I mean, this is apparently may not have the sense of urgency. On the other hand, if there's not a lot of concerns, then we can talk about that and maybe we go ahead and take a vote tonight. So we'll leave that open. But why don't you bring that up? I think everybody's had a chance to look at it. It's been posted since late last week. It's relatively straightforward. Missy, I'll let you run through the document. I don't know if we need to go through the whole thing. Hopefully people have had a chance to look at it.
Sure. I'll just share, I know at Energy Commission meetings, we don't often have this memorandum as background. It is something that we give to council. So we just decided to go ahead and draft it, especially because this project has had a life and some of that life was earlier than some of the commissioners. So this is just background to be fair. And then the resolution itself looks pretty similar to the presentation, acknowledging that we've got our carbon neutrality goal, strategy 1, 100% renewables, 2 of those actions under strategy 1, as we talked about our community solar and the landfill solar project, that we've been working on this for a while to design it, that we intervened in the rate case, I'm sorry, not the rate case, the VGP section 61 and got the settlement that we got, acknowledging that the community solar, if we want to move it forward, it is only possible through collaboration with our investor-owned utility, DTE, and then goes to, punch points that we just talked about. But the final result is just to support and asking council to move it forward in a timeline that gets to the fastest groundbreaking possible, if possible in 2022. That's my goal, but yeah.
Thank you for that quick overview. I'd like to ask for a motion to consider the resolution and a second, if there is indeed a second, and then we'll open it up for discussion.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
So, and a second. Commissioner Juneau seconds. So Commissioner George and then Commissioner Juneau. Comments, questions, comments of concern, comments of support. How do people feel about this? It's not that late, everybody.
They love it, John. No.
So I'll talk for a second, not very long. I've been on commission now for several years, and like Missy said, this goes back to now several years. I was one of several current and past commissioners that attended a public forum out in Pittsville Township, presenting this, and no, I'll get to you in just a second. I think as with any major project like this, these are not black and white projects where it's either all bad or all good. And I think what we've seen here is that while there are some concerns and maybe there are some things we would have liked to have done differently, in my personal opinion is that we need to do everything we can to accelerate greenhouse gas emissions reductions. This is one way of doing it. Some people might argue that we could just steer people to My Green Power, but I think actually we're going to get a lot of additional subscribers by having our own program and going this way. I'm supportive of the project. Commissioner Levine.
Yeah, I just wanted to also go ahead and say that I am also supportive of this project. I do also understand some of the concerns that have been raised both by the public and people on the commission, and particularly with respect to the additive properties of this project and how it will, whether or not we're just moving electrons closer to Ann Arbor and stuff like that. And I do think the way Missy described it really makes it clear that a project on the landfill is complicated. It probably wouldn't be happening at all right now, or at least for 3 or 4 years, however long it takes, if we weren't going to do it this way. So I do really think that it is important to get projects going, and from when like John kind of said, every avenue that we can to get more renewables, I think is a valuable way. It doesn't totally, I don't think it, prevents us in the future from doing something else with an SCU or other ideas that we might want to do. And, it's just going to be a lot faster than waiting. And I do support going this avenue at this time.
Others, there's people on the commission that I imagine have a viewpoint and have a lot of experience, and or maybe no experience, but still a viewpoint. Does anybody else want to weigh in? Commissioner Peck.
Thanks. I got to support it too. Probably like everybody, it feels like a darn poison pill or something, what DTE is doing to, on one hand, partner with folks all smiling and doing their solar, and then at the same time are really doing grave danger or damage to the state of Michigan with their political activities and the way they spend our money against our best interests. It really upsets me. But I think we do need to go forward. We got to say, one way or the other, we're going to do this. Climate action can't wait for the bad actors all to get on board. So let's do it. And I am a My Green Power guy. I spent a lot of extra money on that. And I will want to switch over to the Ann Arbor one. But I'm happy to get my green power either place. And it's obviously pretty darn symbolic, but we just need more. We need more solar panels in the state of Michigan. Thank you.
Thank you. More solar panels and less natural gas plants, right? Any other comments? Any thoughts or preferences on taking a vote this evening or postponing and having an opportunity to put this out to pasture for a month and taking a vote in May?
I think, Mr. Chair, I'm in favor of taking a vote on it now.
I don't hear anyone opposed to that. So we have Commissioner Hookham.
I would only say an opposite, maybe that we didn't have a chance to read this till fairly recently, and the whole project's kind of evolving. I'm a little bit concerned about the subscription rate that's going to evolve from this. If the subscription rate from a singular project comes out and it's high, even if we want to be symbolic and buy that power, it's going to be more costly than my green power. And to Larry's point, maybe earlier, there will be some dissension amongst the ranks as to how this gets dealt with. It's a little bit confusing being the first one out of the block. I think having an opportunity for, I'll call it community solar light, is good. I think we all need to have access, and a lot of people don't. So I'm cautious. I wouldn't mind having a kick at the resolution once and seeing it passed in May. I don't think losing a month is a big deal. Just my 2 cents.
Thanks for weighing in. I have a question of you, Missy, and that is, and maybe this is putting you on the spot, but if the costs were to come in higher than the blended typical My Green Power costs, would that be potentially or likely a reason to take an exit ramp on this project?
Well, I mean, I don't imagine why we think they would not come in higher. Of course they would come in higher because it's a landfill and there are more complications. It's not, 100% greenfield 100 megawatt system. So no, we've already assumed they're going to come in higher. That doesn't scare me. I mean, what I often hear from stakeholders is they really will prioritize a local project, and maybe not everyone will, but I think that I would be shocked if it comes in at the same price as everything else.
Okay. Thanks for sharing.
Ann Arbor's also expensive, right? So think about location too. So there's just elements there.
Right. I guess one advantage is that DTE is not paying for any siting fees or anything like that. That's one, but that's probably a small amount in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, if we had them pay siting fees, we would just have to pay them back.
Yeah,
right? Because it would just get built into the cost. So yeah.
Yeah. So we have 2 opinions. What I would recommend is that we take a vote. And for those who would rather wait until May, that you vote no. That's just my recommendation. You may vote no for other reasons. And for those who feel comfortable enough voting on this now and to move this forward and comfortable enough with the process going forward and being able to intervene at a later point in time, if any of us think that's necessary, or as a body, we could also come up with a whole new resolution that says, hey, we recognize something else has gone on, then we could essentially rescind or modify what we act on tonight. Any comments on that?
I think that makes sense, man.
Okay, great. So all those in favor of the resolution as drafted, and Missy made a small revision that hopefully you all saw. Please say aye and raise your hands.
Aye.
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 And all those opposed? So Commissioners Hookham and Commissioner McCoy, and any abstentions? Oh, and Commissioner Kerber. So we had three negative votes. So the resolution passes,
Yeah.
And Missy, do you
Apologies,
need-
I just have to get it for the notes, so bear with me for a second.
Okay.
I think we can proceed though, because I can.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So that is all the major items on the agenda. Missy is busy right now, but she's next on the agenda. So
okay.
we'll have to wait for her. And that is an OSI report out.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. It has been whirlwind, as I feel like maybe is the new normal in our lives. A few things to share. Well, a lot of things to share with you all. Council last Monday approved ARPA spending, which included a $4.5 million for solar at city facilities. So we've got those project design. We just had a meeting today for final park sites, kind of landing on those projects. But what we've got is over 4 megawatts of system design. And we are meeting with our contractors to understand the Department of Commerce investigation and how that's impacting them on Thursday. If it is all good to go, we will be coming to council in May for final approval of those contracts, meaning we'll be breaking ground on those projects. And all summer long into the fall, you'll see kind of ribbon cuttings for those systems, which we're really excited about. So that's really great. We are also, green rental housing was slated to come back. We talked about that a month or so ago. It's slated to come back next month, but I wanted to share that public comment is now open on the draft standards. So we'll be coming back to the commission to share what we heard from public comment, but we also want your public comment. So please take a look at those standards. It's only open until Friday, end of day. Spread widely through your networks. We want as much feedback as possible on that particular initiative. I'm going to go back to OSI, but before I forget, I want to acknowledge 2 other things happening in the city. We're in the process of updating our multi-hazard mitigation plan, of which climate is centered in that work. And we actually picked a firm that brought on a climate scientist to help us, because that's not optional as we think about hazard impacts. We just opened that up for public comment and feedback too. So I'll send a note to all the commissioners. I just got the URL for public comment shortly before the meeting. So please share that too with your networks, those who are interested. Other really exciting stuff that's kind of going on is we soft launched the public outreach on the sustainable energy utility last week. We are formally launching this week. We're working on a mailer that will go to every household and business within the city. We have social media kind of pushes, and the whole point is to get the public's feedback on the concept of the SCU and whether it's something they'd be interested in. You can go to our website, which is just a2gov/A2SEU, and you can see a whole bunch of materials. We're working on a PSA with communications right now, but we have short FAQs, longer FAQs, we've got videos, and the link to the survey is there to register feedback. It's 4 questions, really short, and then it's the traditional demographic question of the city. Also wanted to share last week, the options analysis, including the RFP for traditional municipalization was released. So that's out for public comment, for bidding at the moment. That closes in a few weeks. I don't remember the exact date, but it's in May, but that'll close. So that's out too. So both of the kind of big initiatives and then the overarching kind of energy options analysis that this body moved forward for recommendations to council, they're on the streets. So we're getting feedback, we're getting input. We are running at those different initiatives. We are also doing an electrification expo in July. We're working with a bunch of partners to bring that together. It'll be at the farmers market. More details to come, but just wanted to share in case anyone is listening. We know electrification, some things are sort of hidden for folks. So we want to really daylight different appliances, equipment, and ways people can transition over. I don't think I shared this with you because I think it was right after, maybe I did. We did submit a $2 million proposal in partnership with the county to fund decarbonization efforts in the Bryant neighborhood. So I want to just take a moment and thank all of our collaborators, Community Action Network, Elevate, the Washtenaw County Office of Community and Economic Development. We had IBEW 252 helping us with workforce training. We had banks who were helping us think about intergenerational wealth accumulation. It is a long shot, but you can't win if you don't get in the game. So we submitted our proposal. Everything is crossed, including my eyes, that manifests itself. And we continue to run at that project, which I love. And then I think last 2 things to share, A20 week. You're going to start to see a lot about that coming out. It's June 5th through June 11th begins with the Dexter Ann Arbor race. If anyone's running it, we are helping it go zero waste this year. All right, good for you. We'll be at Taste talking about delicious local sustainable food. And then we're going to do a tree event. Then we've got events all throughout the week. And then we culminate on Saturday with Ann Arbor Summer Festival. Saturday will be A20 day at Summer Festival. So we've got a lot of fun activities. Hope you can join us for some of those fun festivities. And lastly, I want to thank Chuck Hookham. Chuck is, I think we're trying to make this his last official meeting, not because of anything bad, but because we are likely going to hire Chuck to come on board as a strategic energy advisor in the office. And that would be a conflict to serve on this body and that body. So I just wanted to take a moment while we had it to really thank Chuck for all of the service that he does and share how excited I am to really get to dive much more deeply into his expertise and leverage it to do just transformational work. So thank you, Chuck, for your service on the commission for all these years. And I'm sad to see you go from this body, but I'm so excited to see you kind of come a little bit closer to OSI. That's all, Chair.
Thank you, Missy. Thanks, Chuck, for all your service. Would this indeed be your last meeting?
I'm not sure. I guess I have to work that out with Missy. I don't know what the rules call for, so I'm a little bit unclear on that. But yeah, it's been a pleasure working with all of you. I've been on a long time. It's all old horses typically get led to the pasture. Hopefully my pasture is a little greener than some of the other pastures where horses go, but I'm not too old. I'm still young in the brain and in the heart. That's what counts, I guess. So we'll keep trucking and hopefully our paths will all cross again. I'm sure they will. Keep up the great work on the commission. I won't be missed. Somebody else will jump in and have a lot more ambition than I do. I'm a little bit stretched at times, and maybe I wish I could have contributed more, but I really enjoyed the time and hope I made a little bit of a difference. Thanks.
Well, Chuck, we're going to invite you back to make a presentation. And when you're done, we're going to start with this comment. Well, we could ask a million questions about this, but but we'll spare you. Okay. We are now to updates from council liaisons and from commissioners. We'll start with council members. Any updates?
I don't think that I have any updates beyond what we've heard tonight that would be necessarily relevant to this group specifically. A city update of excitement is that our new city attorney started this week. And so that is of note. And so we are excited to have her on board.
I don't see Councilmember Briggs raising her hand, so I will open it up to updates from all the commissioners.
Is this the time where the committees can report, John?
Sure. Go ahead. Yes, indeed.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'd like to provide a quick update. The Transportation Electrification Committee has been requested by OSI to provide an outline and an overview for inclusion in the city's standard specifications for design, building, and construction resources of installation of electric vehicle charging systems in the public rights of way. So like the street side charging. And what this will do is it will enable future development and availability of street side EV charging at some point in hopefully the near future. But regardless, this is the beginning of what it helps building inspectors, it helps engineers, it helps installers know what the requirements are for installing EV charging stations, both level 2 and DC fast chargers. So that's the update for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Any news from any other commissioners? I'd like to pass on one item of note that I think is important. Council members, and Missy, correct me if I'm wrong, but the PUD for the Ann Arbor Housing Commission development at 350 South 5th, which is the former Y lot next to the Blake Transportation Center, has been approved by council. And that foresees or has sustainability requirements, including just at a 30,000 foot level, that it be an all electric net zero development. So I think that's very positive, and hopefully as we get that goes out for requests for proposals, that some of those proposals will potentially even go beyond that. I think all of us remember that we passed a resolution encouraging construction projects to use low embodied carbon materials. So hopefully some of the bids will reflect that desire. And so I just wanted to mention that. And I see that we have 2 hands up. So that was the only thing I wanted to mention. Commissioner Overpeck.
Quick and dirty. I think the governor's substantially revised My Healthy Climate Plan will be released on Earth Day. So since that'll be after this and before our next meeting, keep an eye out for that. Hopefully everybody will be smiling a little more as a result.
And Missy.
I'm sorry, I forgot 2 things that I just want to make sure the body knows. Obviously, Earth Day. Please join us in a series of events and activities throughout the community, and I can circulate what those are. But also a piece of good news that I forget because I learned so late in the process, as did Jen Hall, but we got a $3 million earmark to do solar and electrification and energy efficiency at affordable housing sites, housing commission sites. So that was an earmark request we worked on together, and we are super excited that we won it.
That is good news indeed. Councilmember Briggs, I think there must be more good news.
Yeah, I did think of one small thing that might be of interest here. This came out of the Environmental Commission, but we did pass at the last council meeting that May will be also known as No Mow May. So if you would like to not mow your lawn and get a little more time on your hands and do something good for the environment and help our pollinator habitat, that is something that we're promoting this coming May, joining with other cities across the nation to do this.
We can't cut our grass? I like that.
You could.
No, I don't want to.
Or you could join the movement and not and feel good about yourself.
I want to feel good by sitting on my butt. Thank you.
I might mention I just had a prescribed burn done in my backyard this afternoon. So just before our meeting. So I won't be doing any mowing back there either. Any other comments from anyone?
I just want to give kudos to Commissioner Hookham for all of his work that he's done with the Transportation Electrification Committee. And there's no way we can be making the progress that we've been making and that we are making still without your participation and the gracious sharing of your experience and your deep, deep knowledge. Thanks so much, Chuck.
Thanks, Carlene. You way overblew what I'm providing. You're doing a lot of the leadership. I'm just kind of filling in the little words and pieces. So happy to do so.
Very good. Oh, Commissioner Juneau.
Yeah, just real quickly, as many of you are already aware, the newest installment of the IPCC report came out. This is focused on climate change mitigation. It has a lot of relevance to the work that we do and to energy systems in general. So hopefully that's something we can potentially talk about at the next meeting in a little bit more detail. And Peck and I are planning to do a demystifying the IPCC report as well.
And the date for that and time has been set for
May 12th, 6 p.m.
At 6 p.m. Right.
Yeah.
Very good.
It will be so great. And we look forward to seeing you all in attendance.
Right. Missy, I just want to reinforce one thing. I don't know if all commissioners got it. I think I knew of one or two that didn't. And that is you talked about public outreach for the SEU. And if any commissioners are interested in doing that, there were 2 training sessions, but I think most of us are pretty well informed and you didn't miss a whole lot. So if someone's really interested in being a part of that public outreach as also an energy commissioner, that would be certainly welcome, I think, from OSI side. And Missy, if they're interested, they should email you, correct? Okay, great. So that ends updates from commissioners, unless I don't see anybody else. And then we can move on to public input. So this is our second opportunity for public comments for up to 3 minutes. If you are watching on CTN, please call 888-788-0099 or 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 937-6751-6819. This information is also displayed on the meeting agenda and video feed. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone and you will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet place, mute any television or background noise so that we may hear you clearly, and finally state your name and your address at the beginning of your comments.
Caller ending in 228.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. My name is once again Greg Woodring. I'm the president of Ann Arbor Public Power, calling in just at the end to say, first of all, thank you for the fantastic presentation. I think that was very informative and answered at least the vast majority of the questions that were raised. So really appreciate that. Just wanted to chime in with the perspective that I got after this presentation. I think this is shared by a decent amount of the members of A2P2, is that essentially the argument is that we are going to pay more for this project in exchange for speed. That seems like a reasonable trade-off in many ways, though I think that the devil kind of lies in the details there. I think that to really evaluate how much more we are paying in exchange for the speed, you'd have to take into account, for one, the city could definitely borrow this money cheaper than DTE is capable of doing. I understand that there's an argument that that debt would not be on the books for the city. However, that debt would be offset by an asset, right? And not only an asset, but a revenue generating asset. And the future value of that revenues should be evaluated with the extra cost that we are paying for this speed. I wonder exactly what the speed gain is as well. How long would that MISO connection really be? And would we be able to stand up infrastructure that would allow us to consume that power, right? Presumably the water utility could use most, if not all, of this power. What would the cost really be to stand up that infrastructure to be able to supply the water utility with this power? It seems like it would probably be considerably less than the value of the future revenue stream that such a project could bring in, as well as the benefits from the cheaper borrowing power of the city. In my opinion, the city would still be far better off owning this asset on its own. Though I understand that this is certainly not a completely black or white situation, and I appreciate all the hard work that staff has done to bring this forward. But I really think that the community should evaluate whether, with the new plans with the SEU and the potential of a full muni coming on board, whether this might be much more valuable for the city to own on its own. So thank you for your time.
And thanks for calling in, and thanks for contributing to the conversation. And yes, Missy, anybody else?
That's all, Chair.
Okay, so we will move on to the last point, which is items for the next agenda. And we already, Missy, Carlene, and I have set up a few things, and I believe, Missy, we're still planning on a presentation regarding energy concierge services. At least that was the target. I mean, we'll verify that, but that's sort of on the docket. Is there anything else? I can't recall off the top of my head.
Yeah, so we had green rental housing coming back with
correct. Yep,
of the public feedback. And then we did tentatively talk about doing an IPCC discussion.
Okay.
With concierge as well.
Yes, right. So Does anybody have any other items for consideration for the agenda? Okay, seeing none, that concludes our meeting. It is 8:20, and I appreciate everybody's service and contribution to the meeting tonight. It was a good meeting, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. And I wish you all a pleasant rest of your evening. Thanks, everybody. The meeting is adjourned.